Hello, welcome to Power and Pounders Drum Magazine. I am your host, Coran Lategra. It is Sunday, February the 5th, and we just got out of church. Great message. And I am here. I'm going to interview Oden Fong. He's the senior pastor of Poema. It took me a while to say that, trying to get that all out. But he's going to share his story with us. And, you know, there's a new movie coming out called The Jesus Revolution. And it's about how the Calvary movement got started. And I think February the 22nd, they've already doing early showings. And I think the 24th, they're starting to show it in all theaters. So it's mainly about Greg Laurie, Pastor Smith, Ronnie Frisbee, and how all that Calvary Chapel movement started. So I am here to interview one of the legends of those era playing in that time. He's a guitar player. He used to play drums, but, but he still may. But I just want to invite him and share his story about that time and how it all started. So how did you learn to play guitar, and where did that all come from?
I started playing guitar when I was 10 years old, which is a very long time ago now. My mom had bought me like a nylon string guitar, and I played that. But then I heard a friend of mine at school, that's grammar school still, playing an electric guitar. He had a Fender Music Master guitar, and he was playing through a little amp with a drummer, and I fell in love with that. So I tried to amplify my classical guitar by actually taking apart a radio and taking the speaker out of it, taping the speaker onto the guitar, and then running that through the back of a stereo input. So I started, so that got me into playing guitar, and I continue to play guitar throughout my whole life just because of the love for it. Mm-hmm. But I also love drums, and I have my own drum set, an electronic drum set, and I just love drums and love rhythm and percussion and all of that. So I share the same love that all of you out there share for drumming and the sound of it and the feel of it and the techniques. And a lot of my closest friends are drummers, and I've known a lot of really great famous drummers as well. But anyway, I started playing way back when, and as time went on, I graduated into more and more professional music. So from junior high school, I started playing in front of our auditoriums, playing surf music, and then by the time I got into high school, we were always in battle of the bands and playing in front for dances. And when I was just about 17, we almost secured a recording contract with Dot Records, and Dot Records was a really big label back then in Hollywood where I grew up. And it was between us and a group called Colors, and they chose to go with Colors because they were more ready. And they said, well, we want you to keep working. And our manager at the time was a guy by the name of Ray Ruff, who went on to become a really famous country producer and manager and director. But anyway, we were impatient, so we just kind of blew it all off, and we never did a record. And by the time I was 18, I'd already moved down to Laguna Beach, California, and got involved in a group of people that were trying to change the world through LSD. So anyway, that's what sidelined me. And wow. So probably when I was about 21, I had already had a lot of experiences, supernatural experiences concerning Jesus Christ, and I became a Christian probably in 1970, but didn't really start to follow the Lord until I was about 21. And at 21 is where I found myself at this church, Calvary Chapel, and that's where I met Greg Laurie and a lot of the other people that are doing incredible things now in ministry. The movie Jesus Revolution is seen through the eyes of Greg, who was there from the very beginning, and he was a young guy, kind of just fresh out of high school, very enthusiastic, very gung-ho to evangelize the world even back then when he was a kid. And he actually drew and created our very first literature, our track that we used to pass out to lead people or explain to people what it was to be a Christian and how you become a Christian and what you have to do to become a Christian. And so he was very instrumental in the foundation of evangelism in our church. So I just back then I was still a musician, and yet I took the first probably 6 months or more off just to learn what the Bible said. I didn't want to be a musician. I wanted to just learn the Bible, learn about Jesus, learn about what he was all about, because he had already done incredible things inside my life, changing my life and filling my life, because I used to be a pretty depressed person. I struggled with depression. I was always, if you listen to old poems I wrote back in those days, they were dark and filled with despair and lack of hope and suicide. And then when I became a Christian, it changed. I mean, he changed me, and that was the first evidence that I saw that he was really real. So then I became a musician at Calvary. I played a few songs, and they would allow me to play like a song or two in the church. And a friend of mine who I knew back when I was in Laguna had become a Christian before me, and he was in this little folk group now that played at Calvary called Mustard Seed, and they lost one of their members, so they asked me if I would fill in as a third singer, guitar player. So I joined them, just thinking I was going to fill in until they found someone to replace the person that they had lost. But then I ended up staying in the band, and I was in that band until the band broke up many years later. Wow. So back in those days, the bands were all highly evangelistic. We were not worship bands. We didn't play worship music. There were some songs that were sung that you could use for worship music, but our songs were written to convey the truth about Jesus Christ to the world. And so most of the songs appealed to secular people or non-Christian people. And so all the songs that I wrote early on, all were directed toward people who didn't know the Lord, and I was trying to explain to them what had happened to me. It was my testimony, what happened to me, and what I felt, and what it did for my life. And that's, to me, the best witness is your personal testimony as to what happened to you when you said, "Jesus, come into my heart." And so I traveled after that for many, many years, probably into the 80s. I was a lot of the times on the road preaching the gospel, in music, both as in the band and as a soloist. I traveled through a lot of places all throughout the world, and then in 1985, I became a full-time pastor at the same church I started at, which is Calvary Chapel at Costa, Mesa. Wow. And so I've been a pastor ever since, and I still play music. I just do, I lead worship. I haven't written music. I don't usually sing my own songs anymore. I just write sermons. And my sermons, I try to do the same thing, is relate to people on a level that they can understand, try to stay away from sounding religious and cookie cutter. I don't want to be a cookie cutter Christian, and I'm sure most of you that are watching are probably, if you're not a Christian, it's because you think if you become a Christian, you have to become something different. And I'm living proof that you can still be wild and crazy and love God. Mm-hmm. So that's where I'm at today, and to the ends of my days, I think I will always lead worship. I will always think about God and write about God and try to, if people want to, hear about God and know Him. I'd like to introduce people to Him. But if people aren't interested, I have no judgments. I am not prejudiced toward anyone who is not a Christian. I just know that what He has done for me, and I do believe with all my heart that He is the door to the sheepfold. He is the gate that leads into eternal life. And I don't know of any other spiritual master or religious leader that I have ever studied about or read about or studied under that can make that claim. So if you want to get into the kingdom of heaven, I believe there's only one door, and that's through Him. Yep. And the only way that you can come to know Him is just reach out to Him yourself pray and say, God, if it's real, if you're real, if you really are God, I want you to show me that you're God and come into my life and show me and do something. And a lot of people think, well, nothing will ever happen. And I thought the same thing, but my life has never been the same. And that was over 53 years ago now.
Wow. You know, back in that time too, you know, you were mentioning about, you know, LSD and all that. That was really powerful back then because all the hippie movement, as they call it, you know, and I guess when Calvary first started, you know, nobody knew about it. This who is Jesus? Who are they talking about? And then one day, I guess with the influence of Kate Smith, Chuck started bringing in people to the church.
Yes.
You know, and
I think that what happened was Kay, who is Pastor Chuck's wife, extremely spiritual woman. I mean, just amazingly powerful and lit up. I don't know how to describe her except for to say she was always in love with Jesus and enthusiastic and really cared about outsiders because when hippie types started coming to the church, Lonnie probably being the one that led a lot of them to the church, and he had long hair. He looked like a little Jesus himself. Kay immediately embraced the young people that were coming and saw, I think she just knew immediately that this was something that God was doing. God was going to fill their church up with these kids. And although we were not looked at favorably by people in the society at the time, because we were counterculture, we were anti-war, we were pro a lot of things that they didn't believe in at the time. She was like this big open heart that embraced us all. So as Lonnie would bring people in because he was an evangelist, and Greg oftentimes was with Lonnie, and he was always witnessing, and so all the people that were gifted with evangelism would bring people into the church. Someone, because of Kay and her big heart, she influenced people to embrace people that were different and that looked different and had different lifestyles. And so she was instrumental in the church being filled up with those of us that were looking for something real.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Music, it's something about Christian music that brings people to God, in a sense. I mean, compared to, you know, the secular songs and the love and all that. But there's something about Christian lyrics, the movie, what it really represents. And I think, you know, up top of hearing the word spoken through Pastor Chuck, the music played a big role in it as well.
It did. Because music breaks down all barriers. Even if you would never listen to a preacher, if those of you that would never listen to Billy Graham or Franklin Graham or Greg Laurie, you'll listen to music. And if the music catches you and you like the music, you might listen to the lyrics as well. And so the original Christian music was so focused on telling the story, telling our story, telling individual stories as to what our lives were like before Christ, what our lives are like now with Christ. And that reached a multitude of people because people at that particular time, in particular, with great upheaval in the world, were looking for something real and looking for something or someone to believe in. And so they found themselves listening to the music that was coming out at the time, which was just like any other music that you would listen to. It was folk, it was folk rock, it was country rock, it was all the different genres of music, but with Christian lyrics that were telling the story about how that person would come to the Lord. And so the original Calvary Chapel had a lot of, for whatever reason, God brought a lot of music into that church and a lot of bands and a lot of people that were expressive and very just prolific songwriters, starting probably with Love Song, who sounded a lot like the Beatles, Beach Boys type of just intricate, very professional sounding music with very moving words and lyrics, you know, written by the guys in the band. They all Three of them were the main writers, but they all kind of wrote and worked together on conveying the truth about the world and different situations and the gospel of Jesus Christ and how Jesus fit into their lives. All just really wonderful guys. And all the bands back then, we all knew each other, and we still know each other today. We still all stay in touch with each other. And
I was just curious to ask you. You keep in contact.
I stay in touch with everyone, no matter where they are. Like the drummer from Love Song, John Mailer, who's one of the greatest drummers I've ever heard, lives in Sweden. And we stay in touch on Facebook and via email. And I stay together with, I stay in touch with him and his whole family. I know his kids, and every time we get a chance, we try to bring Fly Johnny over from Sweden to come over here and play with us. But because of COVID and money, he hasn't been over for a while. But some of the two of the guys in Love Song live over in Nashville, and we don't see them that much. But they fly out every once in a while, and we see them when they come out. And Chuck Girard, in particular, who was the lead singer of Love Song, incredible voice. He was famous as a secular artist. He goes out in the streets and plays. He sets up his keyboard on the streets of San Francisco. I've been out in San Francisco with him, playing and reaching out to people on the streets of San Francisco, even decades later after Love Song disbanded. So we're still all the same people. We still all have the same love for Jesus in our hearts, and our love for people in the world that don't know him, or people that are non-Christians that don't know him. We want everyone to have the opportunity to know him and to get into the ark before the flood comes, in other words, because the world is in some ways in that same position where judgment's going to fall on the world, and the only people that won't be judged are the people that are in the ark, so to speak.
What do you think about the music back then compared to the music today? Is it still having that effect on, especially in our culture today, and especially with social media? Because back then,
Christian music you're speaking about?
Christian music, music.
Oh, music in general.
In general.
I think that
Christian music mainly, though.
Taking secular music first, I think that the secular artists of yesteryear, I was raised in the 50s and 60s, so my favorite groups and soloists were all from the 60s, Buffalo Springfield and, the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and all those people. They were the people I grew up with. Joni Mitchell and all the great folk people, Crosby, Stills and Nash and Young, and I think they wrote beautiful, moving, deep, transparent songs and told stories and painted pictures. I don't think the music of today does any of that. It's more, so there is some expression. Some of it's anger in rap or hip hop. They're angry at the world, or angry at the positions, or angry at the police, or angry at having their heart broken. That's all still there, and that's always been there. But I think that during that particular time, it was a unique time of intricate lyrical and musical artwork, whereas I don't hear that today. In Christian music, I do hear some Christian music that is deeper than just regular congregational worship music, but most of the music is pretty much worship music toward God, which I love and I listen to all the time. I love Phil Wickham. I love, the people that, write nothing but worship music, because that's what I do all the time. I don't think it necessarily reaches people that aren't Christians. I think that if a non-Christian were to listen to it, they would probably just be examining the music content and not so much relate to worshiping God, because they're not Christians. But I think that worship music has a wonderful place, and we will be worshiping God for the rest of eternity. So even after all the other music is gone, people will still be worshiping God. So I think it's more than relevant, and it's the music that we will have in the kingdom of heaven. However, as a person who has an evangelistic heart, I'm always trying to figure out how can I reach non-believers? And it doesn't necessarily have to be with music. Michael Sewell, who is a wonderful musician, but he's also a filmmaker. I'm always bouncing things off of him as to what kind of video can we make? Yeah. What kind of thing can we put up on YouTube that'll make someone think about the emptiness in their own life and the fact that they can have their life filled by Jesus Christ. And so we're always trying to find a way to reach people and love on people, how to take care of people in need, how to feed people, how to care for people who are on drugs and addicted to alcohol. Those are kind of the focus, the area of focus in the ministries that I see myself and other people have right now.
In the world that we're living in right now, what hope can you give someone that's searching? Suicide is like high. Yeah, it is. Especially even before COVID, during COVID, now after COVID, and people are just kind of like, I'm done. Hopeless, yeah. Yeah, and you can see why it gets hopeless because, like, I have 3 young sons. They're all teenagers, 13, 16, and 19. And everything that they see in the world sounds hopeless. I mean, we have this pandemic that's killing people and it hasn't gone away. Nothing worked. The masks didn't work. The vaccine doesn't work. There's a great division in our own country between people who are liberal and people that are conservative, and no one can seem to get together on anything. There's just no middle of the road anymore. It's really hard to make a living. Here in Southern California, you have to be almost rich to stay here or live in a house where you have like 2 or 3 other families living at the same time. 3, 4 jobs. I mean, it's just so hard to make a living, to make enough money to live here. And so that makes people hopeless. And the schools, even if you're smart enough to get into a university or a state college, it's like they're impacted. You can't even get in because there's a waiting list to get in. You have to go to a junior college first to be able to transfer to a university. So I think that people get hopeless, and I don't blame them at all. I think that people that are very sensitive come under Great Depression and think about killing themselves or suicide. And then you have all the nutcases that are running around, a lot of them probably on antidepressants that start to become serial killers or mass killers, and they kill people just because their brains are just short-circuited. And so there's fear. I mean, people feared the cops, and then they took the cops away. Then they feared all the people that were coming after them because they didn't have the protection of the police. So what do you do? What do you do in these situations? And then the racial problem. I mean, I grew up in Los Angeles, so we didn't have, in my eyes, I didn't see a lot of racism because we were all friends, no matter what color you were. But I was there during the Watts riots, and I watched the city burn from a distance, and I understood their anger, and I participated back in those days in equal rights marches and equal rights for women, and I saw everything that needed to be done. But how do you change people? How do you change the system? In our band, Mustard Seed Faith, the reason why we used to boast about it is because we represented every color. We had African American, I'm Chinese American, we had a Native American, and then we had a token. So you guys had United Nations going on. We had all of it, and we roll into towns, and people look at us like we were crazy, So we were glad that God did that, and for us it was great because we would kid around about our prospective cultures and backgrounds and learn from one another the problems in between cultures. Because I was raised as a second-class citizen, even though there wasn't a lot of racial tension between white people and Asians. We were still not equal to white people, and I grew up with that. I grew up with believing that I was never equal to a white person, but I just knew my place, and that was as a immigrant, as a Asian, as someone with slanted eyes and a yellow skin, and that's why I always related to other people that were
minorities as well, because we were all kind of, in some ways, on the outside. Even if we were good in sports or good in music, it still was that we were not equal to white people. So I understand all that, but at the same time, I know that the answer is not to have a big fight about it. We have to find a way to be equal and show our equality and show our intelligence and show our talent without making it a racial issue. I've always waited just for the blending of all people and the total abstinence of racism of any kind, but I'll tell you, it's still there, And even until the late 60s, it was illegal for me to marry a white woman in the late 60s, and I'll tell you, it's crazy. So I understand it all. I have compassion for everyone that has problems in those areas, but I still think that Jesus is the common denominator. At Calvary Chapel, there was no racial prejudice whatsoever. Didn't matter what color you were. We were all in love with the Lord, and we were all in love with each other because we were brothers and sisters in Christ. And anyone who was a Christian, it didn't matter if they went to our church, if they were a believer, if they were from out of the country, if they went to a different church, we were all one family back then. And we accepted one another excitedly and passionately. There was never any type of, I'm of Paul, I'm of Apollos, I'm of Calvary Chapel, I'm of the Vineyard, I'm of, the Foursquare Church. None of that was there. We were all one big family, and that was because of the Holy Spirit who had come into all the believers and integrated us all with one another. We didn't even think about race or color or creed. We didn't think about age. It wouldn't matter how old you were, if you were young or old or in between, or if you were, paraplegic, or if you were a sports star. We were all one big family, and that's what I grew up with, and that's what I still have in me. So I'm an aging Jesus person that will never grow out of it. I'll always be the same until the day that I go to heaven.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. What do you think this movie coming out now, how effect it would be towards, especially it's going to be hitting the theaters pretty soon, the next couple of weeks. What's your prayer that this movie would just like somebody would go, I get it?
I always hope that Christian movies will reach non-Christian people and encourage Christian people. And I think it does that. It fulfills something that is needed within our society, where you have quality movies being made, and these are really quality movies with good budgets and good actors playing the parts. I think that they always will reach a lot of people with the gospel and encourage people that already are familiar or know the gospel really well. As far as reaching the overall secular world, I don't know if it'll do that. In fact, I have my doubts whether or not most secular people will ever see these movies, because they look at them as religious propaganda or religious movies, and there's so many other movies to watch. And so I don't know the effect that it will have. I know that people, because a lot of the people that were alive back in 1965 to 1975, during the Great Revival then, are still alive today. And our congregation has people that were at Calvary Chapel before Chuck Smith came. And so they will be excited about it, and I think it's thrilling for them. And I'm so happy that they made this movie. I think it's wonderful to spotlight Greg, because Greg has always been a really faithful and loyal follower of the Lord, and he's always been extremely concentrated and devoted to evangelism. And I think that this movie will be evangelistic, because they'll probably have a lot of evangelism inside the movie. So for that matter, I think if Christians will do their part and lead, bring non-believing people to the theater, or if they bring backslidden believers to the theater, then we might see a lot of fruit in that. But overall, I don't know. I don't know what it takes. I think I was greatly affected by Ben-Hur, the movie Ben-Hur, where Jesus was a very small part of it. He was kind of in the background of the movie, but that movie influenced me about Christ. And I never was raised a Christian. I didn't know anything about Jesus. But seeing movies like Ben-Hur and other movies like that, where they convey Jesus as being this awesome figure in the middle of time, because all time is really based on him. You know, it's 2023 years since his birth. Everything surrounds his birth. And so who is Jesus? You know, it raises the question, who is Jesus? Why is he so important? Why do people think he's important? And why do so many people not want to believe in him? And those are questions that people should ask. And so these movies and films should bring those things up. And I think that it will be fruitful, but still I want to see more things done that will reach secular people. I'm not sure how to do that. Sometimes it just takes Christian artists that are great, like Richie Furay, for one, who was in Buffalo Springfield and then started Poco, Southern Hillman Furay, just an incredible talent that everyone knows, and he's outspoken about his faith in Jesus Christ. I think that does a world of wonder in the secular world. They go, wow, you know, I'm a really big fan of this guy, and look, he's talking about Jesus. Or when Bob Dylan was very vocal about Jesus Christ, that made a lot of people leave him and hate him, and other people went, wow, you know, if Bob Dylan, who's one of the most intelligent people on the planet, became a Christian and sang these songs and wrote these songs about Jesus, I want to know who Jesus is. So I think that does a lot more than Christian films or Christian TV. But it all has its place, and I pray fervently that God will use this movie of the Jesus Revolution.
Final question. How does one become a Christian? It's not a work.
No.
We know that it's not a work. So
no, it's not being good enough. Yeah. It's not being making yourself good enough. It's just, to me, the only way that people really become real Christians is when they come to that place where they, even with the least amount of faith and least amount of sincerity, come to God and go, God, I've heard about you. I've heard that you died for my sins. I don't know anything about that. I don't know what that means. In fact, it sounds kind of gory. I've seen pictures of crosses and a man nailed to the cross. I don't understand any of it. But I want to know if you're real. And if you're real, then please come into my life and show me that you're real. Enter into my life, enter into my heart, enter into my everyday life and show me that you're real. And this, I mean, God can do anything, but the one thing he won't do is force anyone to believe in him or force himself on anyone. He is a gentleman, and he invites people to know him and for him to be able to come and know you or be with you. He knows you already because he's known you before you were born. He knows all things, and he loves you, and him dying on the cross is just part of the proof that he does love you. And so the way that I know everyone comes to Christ is they ask God by prayer, and prayer is just talking to God. Even if you feel stupid, you still talk to God and go, God, if you're real, if you're there, I don't know if you're real, I don't know if you're there, but if you are, then come into my life. And that's how most real Christians became real Christians. And it shouldn't be through fear. It shouldn't be because you're afraid of going to hell. It shouldn't be because someone intellectually or psychologically talked you into becoming a Christian and said a sinner's prayer. It should be just you and him, you and God, who loves you and who created you and knows more about you than you wouldn't even believe, and he'll meet you. He will. And he will prove that he is a God of his word and that he does love you if you just let him. If you just let him know, come into your life and allow you to know him.
Great. If people want to come to your fellowship, is there a website? You put the link in the description area.
We have a website. It's actually under my name right now, okay. odenfong.com, which is ODENFONG.com. We've never been big on websites. We don't know how to do websites. We've had different people work on the website, and then we can't figure out how to change things on the website. My wife, Sam, is really, really a lot smarter than me and high tech, and she pulls her hair out trying to do the website. So we don't really know. I mean, if you want to find this fellowship, you can find it just by Googling my name, Oden Fong. There's a lot on me on the internet, both good and bad. I'm an
Probably more good than
yeah,
bad.
but I'm an infamous person because I used to be a major drug person, and we tried to change the world through LSD, and that got us in a lot of trouble with the authorities and the police and the state police and the federal government and the FBI and the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. I mean, we are not popular. We were not popular, but many of us did become Christians and changed. And I still have a lot of friends that still take LSD and do drugs and don't believe in Jesus, and I still love them all. I love every one of them. I still stay in touch with a lot of them. They're all slowly dying out because we're getting pretty old, but I care about them, and I hope that one day I will see them in the kingdom of heaven. But I'm too busy to worry about everyone. I just keep looking for new people that are willing to come and then help them on their journey, on their pathway to growing in Christ. And that's what I do now. I just help people grow through the teaching of the Bible from verse to verse, from book to book, verse to verse, trying not to leave out any important thing in the truth of the Scriptures, but yet at the same time always being relevant and not trying to be, relevant in a way where I have to be like the rest of the world in order to, in other words, I don't wear skinny jeans when skinny jeans are in. I'm not tattooed, although a lot of people are tattooed. I do have a pierced ear, because back in the 60s we used to pierce our ear, but we were never trying to be anything or be anyone. It's just person to person, soul to soul, heart to heart, and that's what it's all about.
Awesome, man. Well, it's been a long day.
Yeah.
You taught earlier and been here since what, 6 o'clock, 6 this morning?
But it's fine. Old people don't need as much sleep.
So I thank you for your time, man. Really appreciate it. We've been trying to get this interview down for the longest, and now that this movie is coming out.
And I appreciate this guy. This guy is one of my favorite guys on the planet. I just love him, and I love his heart and his countenance and his drumming and his percussion. He's my kind of guy.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Good having you on Power and Pounders, Oden. Thanks for watching Power and Pounders on YouTube and Facebook. You can also listen to the podcast on Anchor FM, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. God bless.